My name's Arnie Armstrong. I am the MaidTech cybersecurity principal consultant, and I help MaidTech and its customers and partners to understand their cybersecurity risk, guide them to reducing cybersecurity risk, both from a procedural and a technical perspective. A lot of the public sector thinks they're invulnerable from this type of risk. And it's that usual thought process around, well, why me? Why would I be targeted? And a lot of organizations already have very secure networks, have an incredible amount of monitoring and protection around their systems, their services, their networks, and their people. And actually, these APTs are not out always to just steal some data. I mean, that's a real good goal. But the other side of it's a bit more nefarious. There are organizations, or rather, I guess, countries and foreign governments out there who simply want to position themselves into a place where they can cause the most damage. I think it's important because it impacts the people, both in organizations, but also in every single country around the world. People are the asset of that country. But it also impacts the trust that the people have on the public sector. And without that trust, the public sector slows down, it becomes ineffective. And that again has a follow-on impact on the public sector's ability to run services. GP surgeries are, get this analogy that it's incredibly hard to get an appointment at GP surgery. So you have two responses to that as a person. What you do is you either give up and say, I'm not going to get an appointment, so I'm not going to try, or you decide to yourself that the trust is broken. So what you're going to do is you're just going to call incessantly every single hour of every single day, because of the fact that you don't trust that the process is working correctly. So you're going to bombard that process. You're actually making it worse. Now, if everybody just had faith, and if we trusted in that process, then maybe the GP surgeries would be in a far better position to provide service to the people that need it. And the same thing is true of organizations that get hit by cyber attacks. The trust is then lost, and people try to find mitigations for that within their own actions. I think for too long, the cybersecurity industry and cybersecurity professionals have fallen on this line that users are the biggest risk to cybersecurity within an organization. And I've said it myself. Over my time at MaidTech, I've spent a lot of that time talking with our user-centered practice and trying to understand, what it means. What does it mean to be user-centered? And I think what it means, and I think I'm still on this journey, and I think hopefully people will come with me on this journey. But I think what it means is, rather than blaming the user, let's design and build systems that make cybersecurity easier. I often use the example of an email system. So if you think of your standard webmail system and you log in, and these days you typically have your inbox and your spam folder. But every so often, some of that stuff leaks through and ends up in your inbox. These days may well say, this looks like a suspicious email. Doesn't say why, doesn't provide any more context. It just simply says, this might be bad. You should think about it. Now, as somebody that understands how email works, whenever I see an email like that, the first thing I do is go look at the headers of that email. I determine the source location. I look at the reply, the return address. I could go so far as to start looking up the IP address of that mail server that it's been sent from, to try and determine, whether there's any additional nefariousness around its origins. Those processes you could automate through an API. You could give the user that kind of information, allow them to make more sensible choices by taking technical information, parsing it, make it more understandable to the user, but give them absolutely everything. And now you need to be careful with that. You don't want to overload people with information, but the power is in the information. It allows them to make more sensible choices. And that is making a system that is user centric. It's giving them everything that they would need in order to make a sensible choice about their cybersecurity risk. And I think we can do that across the board. Another example would be local government holding or requiring you to log into a portal of some kind with a username and password. The vast majority of the people utilizing local government services are going to be doing that. So we're massively increasing that singular person's risk in the event of a cybersecurity incident. Also, it's just not needed. I'd argue that for most local government services, no username and password is needed, and that we could pass off that authentication process to a third-party provider. We could have one-time password usage. There are so many ways around this that reduces the risk on the user, but we don't think of it that way. We don't think of the way the user is going to use this service. We just automatically think we're building a system, we need a username and password. Let's stop doing that. As far as password reuse, the reality is that every single day, dumps of passwords from hacked systems are being placed on the dark web for people to purchase, download, and spread. There are services out there where you can type your email address in. It'll tell you how many dumps your email address has been found in. The service is Have I Been Pawned? So if you Google that, you'll get there. You just put your email address in. If it asks for any more detail, then you're probably on the wrong website. So don't add any more detail, but putting your email address in, it'll tell you how many database leaks you've been in. For me, I think it was 30 plus. And the reality is the internet is everything to us now. It's our banking. It's where we buy things. It's where we talk to people. It's how we live every aspect of our lives. Those passwords are probably more important than the keys to your house, because not everyone's going to try opening your door. But I can promise you there is somebody right now trying to log in to your account. It's happening every day, every hour, because writing a script to constantly roll through a list of username and passwords to see if one works is very easy. By not designing your systems and services to be user-centered, you are inadvertently alienating or possibly on purpose, alienating the users of that service. You're making it harder for them to be secure. You're making it harder for them to use the service. And ultimately, that will drive people to not use the service. Or, probably more importantly, will drive people to try and work around the security that you've put in place. And again, if we talk around passwords, when you have a system or a service that's going to be used very infrequently, the local government example is great. Like, how often am I actually checking when my wheelie bins are being checked or collected, rather? So if I have to log in to do that, the likelihood of me using a much simpler password is incredibly high, because it's not an important service to me. It's not something that I really care about. So if a large proportion of your users are using really bad passwords, somebody decides, you know what, I'm going to do some password guessing attacks on this system. How good is your data? How can, what happens if someone breaks into many of your users and just starts modifying that data? That's going to annoy the users, but it's also going to impact, we go back to trust. It's going to impact the trust. It's going to impact the ability for your organization to actually do what it needs to do to function. And I can promise you that those users are only going to blame you. They will not blame themselves because of the weak password. They'll blame you because you didn't provide them with a system that made them want to choose a good one. I think when it comes to leveling up and improving cybersecurity, I mean, the starting point is to accept that you need to do that. I've worked in the public sector for many years, and I know what it's like to have a list of competing demands, a really strict budget, and the reality that you probably can't resolve everything. But you've also got to account for the impact that a cybersecurity incident will have on your ability to do all of those other things. So accepting that cybersecurity matters, I think, is kind of step number one. Step number two, I mean, I'd look to the NCSC's recently published guidance. So the Cyber Assessment Framework, CAF, we've started to see it being utilized across the public sector. It has, some very easy to understand steps to assessing the state of your cybersecurity within your organization. And that's not just public sector organizations. CAF is incredibly powerful, incredibly easy to understand. The one challenge with utilizing the cyber assessment framework is that it's not always clear, if you do not meet the requirements, how you can then meet the requirements. And that's when it's important to reach out to other organizations or even other people within the public sector to seek support. NCSC CISP, the Cyber Information Sharing Program, is a great example of a government-led initiative that brings suppliers and public sector organizations together to share information and share good practice around doing cybersecurity better. And there are many local government organizations that are seeking assistance from programs such as that, as well as just partnering up. Local government will be stronger if it works together. And we saw that as a requirement coming out of the National Cybersecurity Strategy that was published last year. A lot of the talk in that was around how do we bring government organizations together to share the burden, share the problem, spread the load, and spread the cost. And I think we need to see local government especially focusing on those things in order to provide better, more secure services to its constituents.